Yeah, Ed 209, such an iconic piece of 80s pop culture. I was so excited to encounter him in the first Robocop game by Ocean, even though I was killed every single time. And my jaw really dropped through the floor when he made an appearance in full 3D during one of the many cutscenes of the amazing Robocop 3 by Digital Image Design. But this metal mutant was also the inspiration for many new game characters. On the ST, for example, in the fantastic The Killing Game show, or on the Amiga in Walker, both games published by Psygnosis. And I'm sure there are many more. But today we're gonna talk about a little game that has gone mostly under the radar, and that's a real shame. It was even released for free in ST format issue number 37. And recently it has gotten a full STe enhanced remake, which deserves your attention. So hit the like button and stick around. Welcome to the show. In 1981, Sir Clive Sinclair released the ultra-low budget ZX81 computer and was in large part responsible for creating a generation of programmers. Miles and Patrick Lord, two brothers born and raised in the UK in the 70s, are a prime example of this generation. One day their dad came home with a mysterious black box. This was a ZX81, and on this machine the first steps into programming were made by copying code for basic games listed in their favorite magazine, Your Computer. After the ZX81, a few Spectrums followed, and on this machine they got hooked on the ultimate series of games, like Jetpack, Attic Attack and more. At one point, Miles got completely hooked on Manic Miner, which was notorious for its difficulty level, yet he managed to complete it. After the Spectrum, the Acorn Electron was next, taking the first steps in assembly language and of course playing Elite. But it wasn't until their dad bought the Sinclair QL, which would be his business PC, that Miles got his first taste of 16-bit assembler. This machine was the perfect preparation for the Atari STe, which they immediately bought when it came out. And with the Atari, Miles was ready to finally create real games, or so he thought. Patrick had the idea of doing a game with a walking robot for quite a while now, and he was really impressed with the animation of the hero in the Impossible Mission game. The way he could jump and roll, and he wanted to do the same kind of game with a realistically walking robot. He actually started to draw the robot on squared paper, and he then cut out the robot's body and the pieces of its legs and fixed them all together with pins at the joints. He could then move the legs into a formation and capture each stage of the walking by tracing the outlines onto square paper. This ensured a natural look. For example, he tilted the front of each foot down as they lifted off the ground, and he also made the robot's body oscillate up and down as it walked. The sprites themselves were eventually drawn using Rainbird's advanced OCP art studio. Miles had spent ages writing his own sprite routines in assembler, trying to draw sprites at any position on a coordinate system. And while it worked, it just wasn't very fast. But the defining moment was when Bullfrog shared their sprite drawing routines on an ST format cover disc. Miles was blown away. So he started working on a prototype game using the robot graphics by Patrick. He also used ideas of an earlier unfinished game by his brother called Zyro. And so, Droid was born. For the game, both Patrick and Miles were inspired by the Bitmap Brothers classics Xenon and its sequel. Patrick loved the stark variations in color and metallic effects, and Miles wanted to incorporate the Mega Blast of the sequel into his game. And now they only needed a developer's name. They called themselves Spiral Mile. This was based on an animated spherical spiral made up of dots that Miles had knocked together using 3D code as a little side project. In 1992, the game was finished. Miles had always dreamed of getting on the cover disc of his favorite magazine, so he got in touch with ST Format. They offered him £200 and the game was released in the August issue of that same year. After Droid, Miles created a sequel while at university. He wanted a more expansive map with better multi-channel sound effects. He also did a Sinistar clone called Graveyard. This game was done while his parents were on a 2-week holiday. Miles loaded up on whiskey and created a shooter which was so difficult he got nearly unplayable. But his personal masterpiece, the crown jewel of his Atari STe game developing endeavors, that must be Hoog. This is a beautiful puzzle platform game, boasting with colors and featuring parallax scrolling on a standard ST, heavily influenced by the Bullfrog classic Flood. This game is so good, it deserves an episode on its own. Who knows, maybe one day. But wait friends, we're not there yet.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the bowl.
For Jamie, it began when he first saw the basic programming language on a ZX Spectrum over at a friend's house. He was so fascinated, he started making his own programs. On paper, he didn't even have his own computer yet. But luckily, his mom picked up on this and eventually got him an EACA Color Genie for £50. But that was just the beginning. A few months down the line, something on TV really shook him. It was the Color Splash Atari STFM ad. Each time this ad came on, it had his full attention. And in the first half of 1990, he became the proud owner of a 520 STFM with the 20 games included in the power pack. And of course, on this machine, he became an instant fan of Droid. Fast forward to 2012. Jamie was learning assembler and Droid popped into his head. He disassembled the code, reassembled it back again, and it worked. So he went on a quest to enhance the sound effects for the STe using the DMA. When it was finished, he posted this version online and the requests for more features started coming in. But of course, this was easily said and done. So for the time being, that was that. In the meantime, Jamie did an STe enhancement on the game Clocks, adding the arcade version sound effects. This was released in 2017. A year later, he created the sound engine Turbo Chip, which enabled creating chip tunes with an output of 7 channels, using the DMA and the YM chip together. By 2019, he picked up Droid again and started reverse engineering the original game data, figuring out how the graphics and maps were stored. But in the end, he decided to rewrite the game completely. Turning the game from a 2-way to an 8-directional scroller would make the original code too complex. During the pandemic of 2020, Jamie had more free time and he really got into the coding zone, and this is when Droid Special Edition was born. He wrote a small program on the ST to rearrange the map data and display everything in glorious full screen. He also changed elements of the gameplay. For example, you can crouch in the original game, but enemy missiles still hit you. So he made the enemy fire slightly higher up, so they miss you if you duck. This gave the game a pleasing strategic element that wasn't previously present. In the original game, you could also use certain items in the wrong order and you got stuck. Things like keycards to unlock barriers. This was really frustrating, but was solved in the new version. Finally, the difficulty was not well balanced. Destroying enemies would drop items. But these were far too random, and some playthroughs would give you some really decent power-ups and others would hand out nothing. These drops were scrapped completely, and Jamie changed some of the static power-ups that are placed in the game to extra energy and ammo. This makes things more deterministic, so you can better plan your path through the game. Other features include a new auto-mapping tool, so you don't get lost in the levels. Also, the controls are optimized. In the end, not a single line of the original code was used, and Jamie had to build everything from scratch. He looked at screenshots and footage of him playing the original game and recreated it all, a bit like they did in the good old days with arcade conversions. And because of these changes, Jamie thinks his Droid Special Edition is a reinterpretation of the original, rather than an enhancement. Ah, you again. You're still watching. Thank you so much, you're my hero. But let's wrap things up. The original Droid was a well-designed game, especially for a debut title. One of the best free games on the Atari STe. Very unforgiving, and sometimes maybe even brutal, as in true Miles lore tradition. Jamie picked this up and added his own flavor, making a great game even better. It's still tough, but you can't afford to miss it. And that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time. Stay Atari. Bye.